so much for having me here today. I always love the opportunity to share my story, but I especially love it when I can do it here in Cedar Rapids. I've grown up in this community since about 3 years old and have really been blessed with the support of the people of Cedar Rapids, not just for our business, but for me personally along my journey. So I have been with Almost Famous for almost 13 years now. My younger brother Carter and I, as Dawn said, started 2 stands inside the Nouveau Market when it first opened in 2012. And those stands eventually evolved into the Almost Famous Popcorn Company of today, which I'm lucky enough to have stepped back into full-time as our CEO in 2022. So I want to get into my story today and share about 2 things that I know a lot about. One is how to make great popcorn, and the second is the pressures that come along with starting and growing a small business. And these 2 things, pressure and popcorn, actually go better together than you might think. And to illustrate that, I want to get into a little bit of a science lesson, but as Dawn mentioned, my background's in international relations, so we're going to keep it pretty high level, but I want to get into the science behind what makes a popcorn kernel pop. So does anyone here know how that happens? What turns this from a kernel into a lovely fluffy piece of popcorn that we can go ahead and enjoy? Heat, perfect. So each popcorn kernel has a certain amount of moisture within it. And as we apply heat, whether that be through your stovetop at home, maybe your microwave, or in our case, these big industrial popcorn poppers, eventually that heat creates pressure inside the popcorn kernel, where eventually that kernel can't withstand that pressure anymore, and it pops into this beautiful, fluffy piece of popcorn that we might throw some butter or cheese or salt on and enjoy. And so in the absence of that heat and that pressure, that transformation can't happen. And what I've found in my journey through small business and other things is that humans are much the same way. Without a little pressure and turning up that heat, a transformation can't happen. Pressure is a catalyst for change. It allows us to see what we're made of, it helps us to grow, and we can pop into our potential. And as I share my story with you here today, I want to keep 3 themes in mind that I've encountered time and time again throughout my journey, both in small business and otherwise. And the first is that heat is best turned up slowly. And I mean this specifically in regards to risk-taking. I think that risk-taking is something that should be practiced, and specifically practiced when the stakes are low, so you can incorporate risk-taking into your everyday life when really the consequences probably don't mean much, so that over time you can build that tolerance. So when it comes time to take those bigger risks, like starting a business, switching jobs, or maybe moving across the country, it feels that much less intimidating and that much less scary. Second, not every popcorn kernel is made to pop. So I don't know how many people here make popcorn at home, but you can try, and at the end of the day, when you open that lid on that pot, there's always going to be a couple stubborn little kernels that don't pop. And unfortunately, there's very little, if nothing, you can actually do to make those pop. That has to do with the moisture level and a couple other things inside that kernel. So no matter how hard you try, it's not going to pop. And that happens in our everyday life too. Not every opportunity works out, and from time to time, we're going to experience failure, and that's okay, because oftentimes failure is what we need to allow us to pivot, to allow us to realize different opportunities, and oftentimes the success that comes from failure is greater than the success that we thought we were going for in the first place. And then finally, it's that kernels were not meant to pop alone. I don't ever go and make one popcorn kernel at a time. I dump the jar in and mix those things all together, and we don't have to do our journeys alone either. In fact, we should find a support system. I have a great support system. Many of them are here in this room today to be able to work alongside us and to grow with us and support us through our journeys. And so now I'd like to get into my experiences and highlight how I've turned up the pressure slowly, taken small risks to get to bigger risks, and embrace some of those failures to get where I'm at today. And I want to start by first explaining to you my first job, which despite opening my business at 14 years old, that actually was not my first job. My first job was here at about age 6 years old until about 14, working at my grandparents' roadside market just off of Highway 30 West heading towards Fairfax. So my grandparents purchased this in retirement as a way for their grandkids to come together, learn the value of hard work, and be able to spend time together. So I'd spend my summers doing everything from planting onions to picking peppers and sweet corn and working with inside the market, counting back change for people and trying to cross-sell them, have some tomatoes with your onions tonight, all different fun kind of things. And my favorite days at the market happened about once a month when these big tour buses would pull up from these exotic faraway places. Now knowing those were like Newton and Des Moines. But at the time, it was very, very exotic. And all these people would come off the bus, and for about 30 minutes, we would just be packed. And I got to hear all these different stories of what was bringing the people there and what their plans were for the day and what their lives looked like. And I would go home at night and sit around the dinner table and tell my parents about all these different people that I've met. And what I came to find is that I really liked this art of storytelling, asking people questions and being able to share that with other people. And so one day, when I was probably 7, 8 years old, I came home from elementary school and I told my mom, there's something that's really missing from the news that we watch at night, and that's the perspective of a kid. I said, can I borrow your cell phone? Because at this time we weren't giving cell phones to kids yet like we are now. And I called up KCRG and I said, hey, I've got this great idea for you. It's going to be news for kids by kids. And they were like, well, thanks, kid, but I don't think this market for that. They were very nice and said, hey, check back in a couple years. So I made a mental note. I'm going to call them back when I'm 11, and I think they'll be ready then. But luckily, I didn't have to, because a few months later, I was sitting in school reading these Scholastic News magazines, which I think many of us in this room have seen before, and I was flipping through the pages, and I saw this ad that said, become a kid reporter for Scholastic News. And so I went to the school nurse and I said, hey, I'm very sick, I gotta go home right now. And got online and filled out the application. And a couple months later, received a phone call saying that I was lucky enough to be selected as one of 2 kid reporters for the state of Iowa, which was really special because it was 2008 and I get to go on to cover the U.S. presidential election in the caucus season here in Iowa. So I spent pretty much no time in the 4th grade classroom. Instead, my mom was shuffling me from political event to political event, and I was interviewing candidates and the people they brought along with them to support them, and really just having a great time. I ended up in this whole media frenzy as well, which I'm not going to share about today, but if anybody ever wants to know about it, I'm very happy to do so. For about 24 hours, my face was all over the news, and it was exhilarating and scary and everything you can feel at once. But what we saw this year with the caucus season is just as quickly as this big rush and circus of people come in to cover the election, as soon as those caucuses are done, they are out of here and on to the next place. So I found myself saying, what's next? I'm not ready to be done as a reporter, but there's no one here left to interview. And so I said, I'm going to go out with a bang. Who, if anybody in the world, would I interview if I could have the chance? So remember, I'm 8 years old, it's 2008, up and coming is Taylor Swift. And so I found the number for Big Machine Records, and I asked my mom again to borrow her cell phone. I called down there, actually got the head of the studio, Scott Burchetta, somehow, and said, hey, I've got this great idea. Taylor Swift is coming to perform in Cedar Rapids in a couple weeks. What if I could interview her before the show? I said, great, I'll pass this along, see what we can do. Several weeks went by, I kind of gave up on that opportunity happening. And then one day, out at my grandpa's farm, my mom and I can vividly remember, we were picking peppers that day, and her phone rang, and on the other line, there was this nice voice that said, hi there, I'm Taylor Swift's publicist. We got your message, we love the idea. We're gonna give you 15 minutes, that's Swift right before the show. And so the show, or the night of the concert comes along, I get to go on Taylor Swift's tour bus, and what was supposed to be a 15-minute interview turned into 45 minutes of me and my mom talking to Taylor Swift and her mom about, the pressures and excitement of being a young woman trying to accomplish big things, and why both of our favorite restaurants, Cracker Barrel. And I always say the best part about this story is, we go to get off the tour bus right before the show, and there's all these fans lined up waiting to take pictures of Taylor Swift, and out steps me and my mom, and you just hear, hello. But I felt pretty cool. I hope some people still have those pictures on their phone. But this was really a wonderful, wonderful opportunity, and where I really like to say that I think my life peaked. At the very least, I know that's where my reporting career peaked. So I, spent the next couple years soul searching, also going back to elementary and middle school, and thinking, what is it that I want to do next? I loved reporting, but I don't know if that's really what I want to do in the long term. What can I do? And one of the great things about having all these experiences young and having parents that supported me and trying new things and opening myself up for the potential of failure is that when the opportunity finally did present itself, back around, it was around 2011 that the Nuvo City Market was opening, and they were looking for someone to come in to do popcorn and ice cream inside the market. I'd already had all these little risks that I could take and build upon, and I had a tolerance that allowed me to go after and do something that was kind of scary. And so about 2 months into my freshman year over here at Kennedy, my brother and I opened our stands inside the market. And you'll also see here, the stand right in front of ours, we actually brought my grandpa's vegetables into the market. My grandma had recently passed away, and that's really how we got connected with the market in general, was as a way to keep him busy. And that's when we found out they were looking for someone to bring in popcorn and ice cream. And so those first couple of years were a whirlwind, and we learned a lot, whether that be the dangers that come from hiring your friends and learning that at the end they may not be your employee or your friend anymore, to what can happen when you don't order enough product or you order too much product, especially in the case of ice cream. When you've got 3-gallon tubs, and if you don't have freezer space, that's not going to last real long. And so this trial and error has continued, as we built this business over the last 12, 13 years. And some things have worked well. For example, we moved outside of the market about 1.5 years into things and into our own retail store across the street. At this time, we grew our team, started setting our own hours, and actually started making the popcorn ourselves in the back of the store. Eventually, we couldn't keep up with demand in the store itself, so we took a very small piece of this building over here on the right side. We started with a fourth and created that as a dedicated production center. And then over time, we've grown to take half that building, and now as of last year, the entire building. We started experimenting with different sales channels. We moved beyond retail to have our own website. We started selling through wholesale channels like grocery stores, gas stations, casinos, gift shops, and then actually discovered corporate gifting, which has grown to be the biggest part of our business, and that's employee and client appreciation gifts, which happen all year round, but especially come this time of year for the holidays. And just grew and changed the way that our business looked. On the other hand, there are a lot of things that didn't go so well. For example, we opened a second retail store in Des Moines in the middle of the pandemic, which shockingly didn't go so well. We've experimented with new flavors that haven't always gone well. Maybe not that surprisingly, wasabi and sriracha are not super popular in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And we've had a lot of experiences where we go and we sign customer contracts before realizing what our profit margin is, or more likely, that there even is a profit margin, and have had to learn along the way. But all of those, failures, unpopped kernels, have helped us grow and strengthen our business and led us on all kinds of exciting new journeys. And I've tried to harness that mindset for myself personally as well. 4 years into having the business, it was time for me to go to college. And I was looking, kind of around Iowa, the Midwest, thought a lot of these schools seem really fun, really comfortable for me, but what if I just did something totally different? And I was lucky enough to get into Stanford University, and so I did all this research beforehand, thought I knew exactly what campus was going to be like, the friends I was going to have, it was going to be great. And then I get out there and I am an absolute fish out of water, and I think, what have I done? I need to look at transfer applications and somehow get myself home because this is not going to work for me for 4 years. But with some patience and getting out of my comfort zone and some of that risk-taking, I started to meet new people, find diverse experiences, and I really grew to love my experience on campus, so much so that when my 4 years were cut a little bit short thanks to the pandemic, I was absolutely devastated when I had to leave. So I graduated in June of 2020, so peak of what the heck is going on in the world, and I found myself faced with the decision of, okay, what do I do next? Like many of us were at that point. I wanted to come back into the business full time. I thought that would be great, but given the state of the world and the fact we didn't even know if we could keep our doors open, I thought that probably wasn't the safest bet. And so I had a handful of different job offers to look at, and most of them were related to business development, marketing, things that made sense for someone with an international relations major. And then I had this one opportunity that didn't make any sense on paper. Really didn't make sense off of paper either. But that was to come and be a software engineer for an industrial supply company. So think like Home Depot meets Amazon. And I was like, wow, that sounds terrifying. And part of my journey at Stanford was it was such a technical school that it seemed like everybody that came in had been building and fixing computers since they were like 2 years old. And so while I was on campus, I was always too intimidated to ever take a class in software development. And I always kind of was mad at myself for doing that. And so I thought, here's my chance to redeem myself. And I explained to them very much up front, you understand, like, I know absolutely nothing about this kind of stuff. They're like, that's great, that's why we want you, you'll think differently. And so that was great. I'm like, I'm ready for this. Well, day one, again, nobody's in the office, we're all working from home. They shift me my computer. I go to log on for the first orientation meeting, and I can't even figure out how to turn the computer on. So I had to call tech support and say, okay, where is the power button? Because this thing is completely hidden. And he should be, no, it's not a big deal, just look underneath and do this. And I've actually stayed in contact with that person from tech support. About 2 months ago, I asked him, does that happen a lot? Because those things are kind of tricky. He's like, no, you're the only one that's ever how to turn the computer on. You can imagine when that's your first morning, you think, absolutely, what have I done? But there was no way out of it except through it. I had moved to Elmhurst, Illinois, because while we were still remote, I had to be within the vicinity of the office in case we opened back up. Had my apartment, had all my furniture. I wasn't going anywhere, so I had to put my head down. I had to ask for help, which I think is a great, great lesson. It's so freeing when you can finally put your hands up and say, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm here to figure it out. Please help me do that. And I grew to absolutely love it. I went from not knowing how to turn my computer on the first day to being able to code in like 6 different languages by the time I was there. And I fell in love with it and would probably be doing some element of that job still today had the business not needed me to come back in. And so it was a very exciting time, challenging time, but really helped me see, the value that can come out of not being good at something, at failing, and being able to embrace that and move on. So now we have this, practicing taking risks and embracing failure. It's all great, but in the moment, it doesn't always help alleviate the pressure that we feel when we come against scary experiences. I myself am a person that's dealt with crippling anxiety pretty much my entire life. And so I've had to go and figure out how to change my mindset from that being a negative thing to really realizing that I can embrace that and make it my superpower. And I'm really lucky to have an ever-growing support system around me to help me do that. And again, that comes down to being able to work with my great family day in and day out in the business, having great friends and in the community, and also just, again, having this great community of Cedar Rapids to be able to lean on and fall back on. And the city of Cedar Rapids and all of the people that live here have really, really supported us as we grow this business, and are continuing to support us as we enter these next chapters. And some of these next chapters have been pretty exciting. Oh, that's my family, by the way. My mom, my dad, my brother, and my grandpa, who doesn't really have an official role. He just steps in every day to say hi to everybody and take popcorn to all his friends. And so some of these exciting new opportunities are that in February of 2022, we acquired another long-standing family popcorn business up in Sac City, Iowa, which is northwest Iowa, about 3 hours from here. That's also when we became the caretakers of the world's largest popcorn ball. On the same day we closed on that acquisition, that was actually my first day back full-time in the business as CEO. And then we've had really fun opportunities to share our popcorn at all kinds of interesting places. We sell popcorn at Kinnick and Carver, so all of the football, Iowa Hawkeye football, basketball, wrestling events. We've sold our popcorn at the Field of Dreams Major League Baseball events. Even had our popcorn at the christening of the USS Iowa nuclear submarine last year. Through some great partnerships with Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses program, we had the opportunity to partner with Caitlin Clark on a commercial, and I had the opportunity to be Senator Ernst's guest to President Biden's 2023 State of the Union address in Washington, D.C., where I can advocate on behalf of small businesses, not just here in Iowa, but around the country. So it's been very exciting to see the business grow and evolve in these ways and be able to, share it beyond Iowa, with the rest of the country. And so, as I conclude, I just want to remind you that none of this first has to be done alone. Create a great support system around you, and if you're looking for somewhere to start, I think this room is an excellent place. I see a lot of smiling faces. I know a lot of people in this room, and I know that they would love to share that journey with you. Don't be afraid to turn up the heat slowly as you go on your adventure. There's nothing wrong with that, and in fact, with cooking popcorn, that's actually encouraged. You don't want to go super hot all at once. You want to turn up that heat and experiment and keep things going. And finally, it's okay if not all your kernels pop. Embrace those challenges, embrace those failures, and really grow and pivot from those. So thank you all so much for coming today, and I would love to answer any questions that you have. Yes, thank you. You caught me off guard because I was just told we won an award this morning, so I'm like, but I don't think I can share that yet. So I was like, does Carissa already know? So thank you for specifying because I didn't want to give anything away. Earlier this year, we've been lucky enough for the past, I think, 5 or 6 years in a row to be on the Corridor Business Journal's